Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Thursday Live with Dr. Jen. I am so excited to be here. We have a beautiful weather here today. I'm sure for those who are usuals here, you noticed that we were unable to come across the stream last week. Yes, we have entered the season where the weather is really impacting our ability to stream on particular days. And I'm just trusting God that this season we are going to have lots of opportunities to still be able to stream on Thursdays as usual. So don't worry, just keep it locked because we're going to do our very best to ensure that we keep bringing you value every Thursdays. Is this your first time here? I'd love to hear from you. Let me hear in the comments, where are you tuning in from? Is this your first time? And if you're usual here, of course, let me know in the comments that I am returning. I'm back again. Okay. And also, I would like, if you've not subscribed to the channel yet, please do us the incredible favor of subscribing to the channel because it helps support the work that we are doing, bringing this value to you every single Thursday. Is indeed it takes a lot of commitment, time, resources, and a lot of things. And just by subscribing to the channel, just by sharing with some other parents, you actually do a lot to support the work that we are doing here at Parenting with Dr. Jen. So once again, you're welcome. Today's topic is one that I believe is, should have every parent seated in their chair listening because this is something that every parent has to deal with without exception, whether you're raising a toddler or you're having a baby or you're raising a teenager or even a young adult, even for yourself. Screens are everywhere. Screens are everywhere. And they are not just something that kids alone need to learn to manage. Even adults are struggling, to handle the impact, the influence that screens are bringing. Adults are struggling with addiction. Adults are struggling with, the amount of time that they lose, right? If adults are struggling, then you can imagine what this implies for children. If adults with their mature brains are struggling, then I'm sure you can imagine what this also implies for children. So, again, we're going to be looking at growing up with screens. Children today are growing up in front of screens. They're growing up with screens, surrounded by screens. Everywhere children go today, they are going to encounter screens in one way or another. By screens, we're talking about tablets, we're talking about even billboards, we're talking about phones, we're talking about TV sets, all of these things through which you can stream different content or watch channels, watch cartoons or whatever, right? All of these devices are what I'm going to be calling screens or refer to them as screens in today's session. So whether your child is a baby or they are a teenager, learning how these screens impact your child's development enables you to be able to make the right decisions. It's not enough to have good intentions. You can have the best intentions, but because you lack knowledge, you still make decisions that will not be to the advantage of your child. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents, particularly parents coming in with kids who are speech delayed or who have focus issues. By the time they hear me explain to them how it happened and how some of the decisions they made earlier impacted the child's present condition, you always see that look of regret. I wish I knew this. Why aren't you talking? Some even ask me, why aren't you talking a lot more about this? We didn't know any of this. If we knew, we could not have made the decisions that we made. That is something I've heard so many times, right? If I could earn $1 for every time I heard that, trust me, my bank account would be stuffed full because, you might think that this is something that is everywhere, everybody's listening. There's still a lot of parents out there who are not aware of the impact of their decisions. There's still parents out there who are probably right now contemplating on giving their 12-year-old a phone or a 10-year-old a phone, and these are decisions they're making just based on, I think the child is big enough, and without really considering what that decision entails, right? How is that going to affect the child? How does it interfere or support their development? That's what we're going to be talking about today. How screens can impact development, either by supporting it or delaying it for children across different stages of their growth and development. So, digital devices today are a big part of childhood, all right? It's something you cannot ignore. No matter, even if you choose to shut down access to all screens in your home, you that's just the tip of the iceberg. All right, the statement screens are everywhere is a literal one. Screens are everywhere, whether it's in school or they are, sitting in different waiting rooms, or even in a shop, they enter a supermarket, there are screens there. Everywhere you go, there are screens. All right. It could not be your child's screen, it could be another child's screen. This is something that I'm actually having to we're facing with schools that have very firm policies about screens. You realize that, yes, kids are not allowed to bring screens to school, but on days like maybe days when they have maybe an event, or they're going out on an excursion, or they have maybe the closing day, those are the days that kids actually bring screens because nobody's checking on those days. And even at those, brief moments of impact, you don't know what the child is watching on that screen. Okay, so I tell parents, don't try to completely shut down access, because a child growing up today in the digital world needs to learn how to manage access. They need to learn it for themselves. They need to learn how to navigate. They need to learn how to use the screen in a way that will be beneficial for them. That's something a child must learn as they grow. So it's easier today to find a toddler on a tablet than it is to find a toddler who is being read stories to. Let me say that over again. It's much easier today to find a toddler who owns an elaborate tablet than it is to find a toddler who is being read to regularly. So many toddler parents don't even think to buy books. All right. So books are not something that many parents are, think is necessary. You have parents who are spending lots of money trying to maintain their kids' devices because this is what keeps them busy, this is what keeps them engaged. But we don't realize that those decisions you are making, the money you are spending to fuel that habit, is actually going to come back later to cost you a whole lot more. So it's easier to find a toddler tapping away on their tablet or using their tablet than it is to find a toddler who is being read to. You'll find several toddlers on tablets before you will find one who is being read to regularly, who probably even owns storybooks. And another end of the spectrum are the teenagers. It is very easy to find teenagers on social media who have not had any kind of preparation or any kind of any set of boundaries that guide how they operate within that space. So there are so many teenagers on social media today. Some are on social media without the knowledge of their parents. Their parents just know, oh, I gave him a phone. The phone is meant for communication, but they don't realize, or they're not going back to check whether this child or how this device is being used, and whether or not this child has an active presence on social media. Your child may even be on your page liking your post and you don't even know because they've used a different identity. So there are so many teenagers who are on social media platforms even without the knowledge of their parents. And social media has a huge impact on how teenagers. So again, whether you're dealing with a baby or to a teenager, the way screens will impact the development of these children is different. Usually, this will depend on what is, at what stage of growth the child is and what their needs are. For example, a toddler at that stage, the growing brain, which is movement. They need to move around, they need to explore. That's why they are called explore. That's the stage of exploration. That's the stage when the child needs to move around. So that tells you, so their need is to move around and explore. And that need is driven by their growing brain. So you will understand exactly how the screen would impact that particular need of that developmental stage, right? The screen will keep the child on the spot, which is a unique way in which is going to impact that child at that particular stage. Because as they grow further, that ceases to be the need, and they actually develop other needs. So at every stage of growth and development, how the screen will impact development is usually unique. It differs. Yeah, there are some stages where it can actually be connected, but usually there are unique ways in which it's going to impact how the child is developing. So you have teens who are all over social media without much preparation, without guidance, and there is a lot out there that can easily overwhelm any teenager, no matter how grounded they are. It's important that parents understand what how vulnerable their child is at different stages of growth and development, and what exactly they can do, how the screen influences their vulnerability, or how the screen takes advantage of that vulnerability. So the question is, are you paying attention as a parent? Are you paying attention to how the screen is impacting your child? Are you paying attention? Recently, I received a couple. I'll call them a very keen couple, right? They're very intentional. This couple reached out to me about their 3-year-old who, you know, is speech delayed. But one thing I noted during our assessment session was the fact that they had noticed that the child had begun using speech. Speech was developing normally. The child had begun using speech, the first few words that a child will speak, saying water or mama or daddy or please, those short, simple words that kids at those early stages will begin to use between 1 and 2 years old. So they noticed that the child was beginning to use those words, but then at some point the child just stopped. The child regressed, and they began to share with me the changes they noticed as well. And they began to ask questions, right? So are you paying attention? Are you paying attention to whether your child is progressing in terms of their development, or they have started to regress, or they have plateaued, the growth has become stunted? Many parents don't even take notice. So imagine that they didn't notice, that this is what was happening to their child, that speech has actually regressed, focus is getting worse, the tantrums are getting wilder. Those findings pushed them to make the changes that they began to make, and they began to seek out for help immediately. And when parents do that, when parents are able to pick up these changes early enough, it's very easy to reverse any damage that may have been caused. But usually what happens is the parents don't pay attention to how the screen is affecting the child, and they just keep increasing. Oh, this child is able to sit down when the screen is there, and it instead fuels the habit or fuels the need to hand the screen over to the child. So I get to meet a few parents every now and then. They're very few. If I meet 10, usually just about one, is very keen to noticing these changes when it just begins, and then start making changes. But most parents will allow it to go on for quite long before they even notice that, hey, something is wrong. Usually it's during the interrogation, they'll be like, okay, did this happen? Say, oh, this happened, but I didn't notice. That happened, but I didn't notice. Because these signals will always be there. Your child's development will always send signals. Sometimes the child will start walking, and when something traumatic happens, the child can regress, go back to creeping, or go back to sitting, and you're like, this child used to walk. What happened? That's a regression, right? Usually there's something that happens along the line that can cause a child to go backwards on their developmental pace. So the question is whether parents are paying attention. Are you paying attention? Are you paying attention to how, the way the screens are being used is impacting who your teenager is becoming, for example, right? So recently I was working, I'm currently working with another case of a teenager who has gotten so engrossed with the whole likes and monetization, and you know how social media is, right? The obsession with likes, the obsession with views, the obsession with creating content and getting attention on social media, to the point where it has begun to affect academics. So these are things that so many parents are dealing with today. But the difference is, many parents don't notice until it has gone too far, that it takes a lot more work to actually reverse whatever it is that is happening. So this question, are you paying attention? So you gave your teenager a phone. You need to be attentive. How is it impacting who the child is becoming? Is the child becoming, more attached to the phones? Is it limiting how much the child wants to spend time outside? Because that's another thing that happens. When you give kids these devices, they begin to lose interest in other things that were probably initially interesting or of interest to them. For example, a teenager might now prefer to stay in their room with their phone scrolling, instead of maybe going outside to meet their friends or to play football. How is the screen impacting who your child is becoming? If you look closely, you would notice. You would notice that every time I turn on the screen, my child has a wild tantrum. Every time I'm out, my child sneaks to put on the screen. Every time. So you would notice who your child is becoming because of their interactions with the screen. It can be positive just as it can be negative, but that depends on what you know and how you are responding to the presence of the screen or to the use of the screen by your child. Very important. Okay, now let's talk about a few mistakes. Now, for those of you who've been following me for a while, I've shared, screens are something that I share upon frequently. I think this year this will be the first time I'm sharing on screens, and I began to wonder, hey, it's been a while since I talked about screens. So let's talk about screens as often as possible, because mind you, even though it might seem as though, oh, we talked about this last time, it's the repetition, because some parents hear the first time and it still doesn't get through. It still doesn't resonate. They still don't get it. Because me being at the end where I receive children who have been negatively impacted by the screen, those are the things that drive, my passion to really keep talking about this, because it is a bigger problem than we realize. So here are a few mistakes that parents make. And at the top of this list will be, using screens as babysitters. It doesn't matter whether the child is 2, 1, or even 12, 13, 14, right? Because I know of several cases where the parent will not be around, and the alternative is, okay, I don't want them moving around aimlessly in the neighborhood, so I'd rather they sit home and watch the screen, and you're going to be out for 6 hours, and they're on the screen, access to all channels. There's no one there checking what they're doing. There's no supervision. There's been no talk or guidance about what they can or cannot watch, about what is okay and what is not. So yes, screens are being used as babysitters, not just for the little ones, but even for kids who are bigger, where this device is being used to fill or to occupy time, just so the child is kept busy. Using screens as babysitters is a mistake. The screen should never be a babysitter for your child. Why? Well, because the screen is a very bad nanny. Okay, the screen is a bad nanny that will never tell your child, no, stop, don't go here, this is not for you, you've had enough, and all of those things, except in the case where the parent sets boundaries. Thankfully, there are lots of apps today that can actually help you as a parent be able to set boundaries that would take on automatically at certain set limits. I think there are apps now that can turn off, a device after maybe a set time. Maybe you set 1 hour of use, can turn it off. There are apps now that will notify the parent if the child is visiting a site that they should not be visiting. There are apps that will show you exactly what your child is doing while they're on the screen. I love that there are all these innovations, right? It's great. It makes the work easier for parents, particularly when you need to maybe step out to do something and you would rather not have your children, or maybe it's even time for them to have screen time, right? These apps are actually very instrumental to help you, maintain guidance even when you are away. So it's important that we educate ourselves about some of these things. So using the screen as a babysitter is a mistake, especially for the little ones, because that's the most common age group that screens are being used as a babysitter, right? It's usually between 0 to 2 years. Those are the ages, and that's the age group where parents are most desperate to use the screen as a babysitter. Why? Because that's the stage where the child is all over the place. They are climbing here, they are touching this, they are throwing that, they have disappeared to this place, and all of that. So yeah, that's the age where parents are most desperate. But this is relevant because that's the stage where you have no business putting that child on the screen as well, right? That's what makes it harder. The fact that these kids, according to recommendation, should not even be on the screen in the first place. They should not be there because the recommendation says no screen for 2 years, except for interactive screen time, maybe a video call with some family member or something. But that makes it extremely hard for parents because that is the time, that's the age group where they really just want to get the child on one spot. But remember I said at the beginning that how to understand why the way the screen will impact child development is unique for different age groups or different stages of development is to first of all understand what the child's needs are at that stage. So for a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, their brain is growing rapidly, and that rapidly growing brain needs the child to move around, to explore their environment, to come in contact with different things, have different experiences, because that helps, fuel the growth of the child's brain, positive growth of the child's brain. So when you immobilize the child, keep the child on one spot for long periods, repeatedly, you understand why it ends up interfering with how the child is going to develop. It's going to cause delays, speech delay, focus issues, poor emotional regulation, antisocial skills. All those things come from using the screen as a babysitter, which keeps the child at this stage from doing what is needed to help support development. So at that stage, the screen is not supporting development, it's actually getting in the way of development. All right. Now, another mistake that parents are commonly making is believing that now there are two ends. I'm going to give this into two ends of the spectrum, right? The first end is believing that all screen time is harmful. Believing that all screen time is harmful is a mistake, because this drives a parent to cut it off completely. I've actually come across parents like that. They've heard teachings on, oh, screens do this for kids, oh, screens are bad like this, they're bad like that, and then they just say, okay, if this screen can cause my child to be exposed to maybe inappropriate content, or can cause the child to lose their focus, can cause the child to do this and that, they decide to just shut it down, take away the screen completely from the home, no access to screens whatsoever. That is a mistake as well. All right, because a child cannot learn how to manage access to a device that is here to stay, to digital devices that are here to stay through deprivation. You cannot deprive me of something and then still expect me to learn how to manage it. Because learning how to manage it comes through practice. All right, that's how your child eventually develops a skill for themselves. If your child has to develop self-control, with regards to how they use the screen, it does not come by depriving all access to the screen. It comes by providing guided exposure. That's how children get to benefit. That's what actually helps the child grow up to understand responsible use of screens. So believing that all screen time is harmful is one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is believing that all screen time is educational just because you've chosen educative content. All right. Now, yes, the content may be educative. I'm not arguing that. I'm not going to argue that your Miss Rachel is not educative, that the Alpha Blocks is not educative, the Number Blocks is not educative, or all those other educative programs that are out there. They are educative, right? They are meant to educate children. But the mistake parents make is thinking that just because they are consuming educative content, it means that it takes away the negative effect that comes from spending long periods of time on the screen. That's a mistake. All right, that's a mistake. Thinking that the child learns best from the screen, thinking that the child, all their learning can be done on the screen. So, oh no, my child is getting really smart. My child can count from 1 to 20 now, and I've been just putting them on programs on the screen, and they're learning all of those things. Because this causes the parent to actually trivialize other avenues for learning. Many parents don't realize that just for a toddler to just play outside, play with other children, play with you, their parents, they learn more than when they are stuck on that screen, no matter what they're watching. Right? Because what happens in those early years in particular is memorization. That's what they're doing. Yes, they will be able to count from 1 to 20, but if you take one number out from that sequence and say, can you recognize the number? The child will be lost. Why? Because they just memorized the sequence. They can just say 1, 2, 3, 4. They can say it in that sequence. But if you take it out of the sequence, that's when you realize that they're not really learning. They are just memorizing. And that memorization, cannot compare to what they are learning when they interact with other children, when they interact with you, when they play outside, when they get different experiences, explore their environment, they learn more. Use educative resources to play with physically. It's more beneficial than when they're just stuck on the screen, cramming and, just reproducing things that they're getting from the screen. Because this is the irony. So I've had many parents come in with speech delay, and this is the question they always ask me. But how come, the reason why many parents might not notice that the child's speech is being delayed is because they're not able to explain how come my child can recite almost everything they're watching on the cartoon. They have mastered it. They can say what Miss Rachel is going to say. They can count from 1 to 10. They can, they've learned the ABCs. But how come they can't ask me for water? How come they don't answer when I call their name? How come they're not able to tell me I'm hungry? Or just those simple, basic communication stuff that the child should be able to do by age 2. So the parent is confused. That's what contributes as well to the delay. The fact that the parent cannot connect the two. So when they see the child reciting what they're watching on TV, it gives a false sense that can talk. Meanwhile, talk is not just, repeating back to me what I said to you. That's not a conversation, all right? That's just a replay. That's just memorization. But real conversation has to be when you ask your child a question, where did you keep the toy? And the child's able to say, Mama is on the bed. That is, you've responded to what I said, giving me different set of words that answers my question. That takes a lot of brain process, right? And that's the problem with the children who have speech delay, amongst other things. The fact that they're on the screen, they're reciting everything that they are seeing on the screen, and they pronounce it so well. Some even pronounce an accent, which actually makes the parent even happier. Oh, my child has an American accent just from watching Miss Rachel. My child has, my child is talking like this just from watching Miss Rachel. I think it's very beneficial. But you see a child of 6 years who cannot hold a conversation, who cannot be able to explain to you what happened on the playground. Why? Because they can't connect, they can't build sentences. So they're able to recite, they're doing okay in school, fairly, they're doing average in school, they're passing their tests, they're passing their evaluations, but they cannot have a conversation. They struggle. All right? Those are all different ways that speech delay manifests itself. So parents don't connect that with how the child interacts with the screen, the amount of time the child is spending there. Because you're like, it can't be. That's why many parents will wait until the child is 6 before they come, or they wait until the child is. I've seen someone coming as late as 7, 8. It's much harder to help children at this stage, pick up again compared to when the parent was able to pick it up earlier and then come in earlier. Right? So don't make the mistake of thinking that just because your child is watching educative programs or educational programs on screen, it makes it okay for them to spend extra time. That's a big mistake. All right? That's a big mistake. Even educational content has to be viewed within a limited amount of time. Those boundaries are what protect your child, because the damage does not come from necessarily from what the child is watching, right? In the case that they're watching proper content, but it comes from staring at that screen, missing out on chances to interact with other people, not being able to go outside to explore the world and do other things. That's where the damage comes from. Not being able to interact, in conversation with other people. That's where the damages come from. So yes, the content is educational, but it does not take away the fact that sitting there to watch the educational content gets in the way of other things the child could be doing. Same thing for teenagers as well. Like I said, some teenagers just want to stay glued on their screens. Think about it, right? If you're paying attention, you will notice that the moment you give your child, your teenager, that phone, over time they become someone else. They prefer to isolate themselves. They'd rather stay there browsing on the phone instead of going outside to play maybe football or play other things. They'd rather be on the phone than read a book. They'd rather be on the phone than even go visit family. So if you're paying attention, you would notice, you will pick up the signals when the screen begins to interfere with how your child is developing. There are always signals. It never happens without a signal. The only problem is we are not paying attention. We're not paying attention. And even when we notice, most of the times we don't know what to do. We don't reach out for help. We wait until it becomes a crisis before we start reaching out for help. One of the skills you must develop as a purposeful parent on your journey is learning and knowing when to ask for help, who to go to for help. Very important, because there are certain things that can easily be reversed if you just came in on time. All right. So I run a program, a specialized program, where I help children who are speech delayed and rehabilitate focus. And recently, I received a child, very young. I think I mentioned the couple earlier, the couple who picked up the signs early and came in to see me early. And I told them, I don't need to put your child on my program. You picked it up so early that if you just make these changes, your child will be able to get back on track. And that's exactly what happens. When parents pick up on these signals early and you make the changes necessary, the child picks up, the development picks up again as if it never stopped. But when you wait, when you delay, that's where problems become crisis. Okay, that's where it becomes a crisis that needs a lot of work. I have kids who have done 5 cycles, kids who have done 3 cycles, and we need to keep going. Eventually they get results, but there's a lot of work required because of how much damage was done from the uncontrolled access, excessive time spent on the screen, and parents not noticing when the changes first began. All right, a child who was babbling maybe at 8 months old, you know how babies babble, they can talk forever, and then suddenly your child just goes quiet, and you're like, what happened? Most parents don't even notice. They don't notice because there's also the comfort that comes with that, right? The fact that the child can now see to the screen can actually blind you from picking up on the signal. So watch out for the signals. There are always signals when screens begin to interfere with development. The next mistake parents are making is treating all ages the same. I think I get this question a lot as well. Parents will ask me, okay, now that kids between 2 and 5 only need this amount of screen time, and kids between this and this need a little bit more. What do you do when you have kids at different ages? That kind of question can only come from someone who is enlightened. That's why I tell you, if you're not learning on your journey, if you're not going after knowledge, you are wrong. Because there are some things that you will do with the best of intentions that will cost you a lot on your journey, just because you never had access to knowledge that could have influenced the decisions that you're making. Knowledge makes all the difference. So treating all kids, kids of different ages as though they are the same. So you have viewing time, maybe screen time, and everyone is just there. Sometimes even watching programs that are appropriate for the bigger kids, because not, programs, even the cartoons that kids watch, a cartoon that's appropriate for a 2-year-old is not the same as appropriate for a bigger child. All right. Now, when we talk about quality viewing, it's not just about, oh, this cartoon is nice for kids. It's not just about the morals, but it's also about how the program is designed. There is a way that programs for 2-year-olds, quality programming for 2-year-olds is supposed to be designed. It's supposed to be slow paced. It's supposed to be designed in a particular way that is adapted to what their brain needs at that time. There are certain things that most kids of this age group are watching that is actually one of the reasons why they end up developing lots of issues with focus, besides just the amount of time they're spending there. But because they spend this time watching programming that is not adapted to that age group. So don't treat your kids as though they are all the same when it comes to viewing time, to screen time. Is it challenging when you have kids of different ages, and it's viewing time? It's challenging. But one thing I tell parents is, usually the younger ones, if they are growing up normally, they're usually not interested. A normal toddler cannot sit and watch TV. I'm talking about normal. Cannot sit and watch TV for more than 5 minutes. Because at that stage, they cannot sit still. I tell parents, when your toddler begins to sit still, that is the point where you have just begun to get in the way of their development. Because normally, a toddler, though, yeah, it will pick their interest, they'll come and look. But before you know it, they have rushed to something else. That's exactly how they are. They pick this, they touch, they leave it. They go to the next thing, they touch, they leave it. Most parents, and they always acknowledge this. I'm sure maybe you've had the experience, right? When you start introducing your toddler to screens, you will struggle to get them to sit down because they won't want to sit down. They want to move. Why? Their brain is driving them to move. So the moment the child just begins to be able to sit for longer, maybe you have yelled. Some of your parents even hit. Can't you sit down? Go and sit down. You keep yelling. Eventually the child will sit. And it's at that point that you have just begun to interfere with their development. So don't treat all of them the same. All right? Don't ignore those developmental needs and differences. What a toddler needs is not what a teenager needs. The next mistake parents make is over controlling or under guiding screen use. Remember I said earlier that when parents hear all the negative side effects of screens, some parents are tempted to just shut it down, shut it out, take it away. I don't want this thing here. It's affecting my children negatively. Yeah, the intention is good, like I said earlier. But then, remember, deprivation does not help a child who is growing up, a digital native as they are called, learn the skills they need to help them thrive in a digital world. Those skills come through experience, through exposure, which should be guided at best. That's how the skills come. You can never develop skills in any area without practice, without exposure, without experience. The more exposure, the more practice you get, guided in particular, the better your skill set. So it's the same thing for these children. So I often tell parents, we have been working with my children, they have access to screens. One of the things we've been working on is, getting them to the point where they're able to control themselves around the screen. Right? Stranger comes in, my kids will not come and pick up your phone. You can leave it there. They won't touch it. We are out of the house, they won't turn on the screen because it's not time for screen. So there's been a system designed around helping them learn control around devices. It starts from there. It starts from there. Learning how to control themselves around devices. So in the system you build in your home has to be able to teach this over time. Now, I can't tell you it took me 1 year to do this. That would be a lie. All right. It is something that we've been working on over the years. The bigger ones have gotten it. The younger ones are still coming up and we are still emphasizing it because it's a very important thing. The child must be able to control themselves around it. I see lots of kids, someone will just come in, you go to visit your friend and their 5-year-old just comes and grabs your phone without even asking you. And some of them still find their way in. And guess what? Some adults' phones have inappropriate content. Yes. That nice looking auntie, uncle who came to visit might have inappropriate content on their phone, but how would you know? And your child is there, oh no, just let him just play games. I tell my kids and I tell people who come to my home, please don't share your phone with my child. Don't even ask for it, don't. That was when they were still very young, And doing this in repetition, the children eventually got the message. My phone is not your toy. Uncle or auntie's phone is not your toy either. So you do not touch people's phones. If you need to touch my phone as your mother, you ask. It's important that we teach them how to manage themselves around screens. If you left home and your kids had maybe screen time, would they be able to turn it off? And that's another thing that even adults are struggling with. Turning it off is hard. Even for adults, it's hard. You go on there, you've lost 2 hours, you've lost 3 hours, you're just scrolling, and you're an adult. Then imagine what it would be like for a child. And you only met this thing, 10, 20 years ago, when the phones really started becoming popular. Even when they started becoming popular, they're not things most of us used it only for calls and messages. Phones didn't have as many apps as they have now. There were no social media platforms then. So yes, when phones just came on board, they were not all that addictive yet because they did not have things that kept you to want to go check. Let me check my messages. Let me check my Facebook. Let me check my Instagram. Let me just check this thing. That's not how it was at the beginning. But now imagine what it would be like for a child who has already been on TikTok, who has already been on Instagram. They have experienced the high that comes from scrolling on those platforms, and they are growing in it, with it. By the time they become adults, if we don't intentionally teach our children how to manage themselves around devices, how to manage access to these devices, it's going to be a big limiting factor. It's going to be a big limiting factor. So over-controlling or under-guiding. Over-controlling means you are over-hindering to the point where your kids are not developing the control, learning how to manage access the way they should be learning. Remember, that only comes through experience, guided exposure. The other end is under-guiding, giving access without boundaries, giving access without support, giving access without supervision. All right? Access needs to have these 3 things in place. Your child needs to have boundaries. Your child needs to have guidance. You need to teach. You need to talk about different things. Your child needs to have supervision. Don't just assume that because my child is good, they will not go there. No. What gets them there is not, what keeps them from going there will not be their goodness. What is driving them to go there is their curiosity, which is not a crime, by the way, even though they say curiosity killed the cat. All right. So that's what you must understand, how children work at different stages of growth and development. When a child is in the primary level, they enter a stage of piqued curiosity. This continues right all the way to the teenage years. They are curious. Their friends are talking about, something that happens with a man and a woman, and they're curious. That curiosity is what, if there are no boundaries in place, can actually expose your child to their first inappropriate content if they have access to a device without supervision. I've worked with kids who are 10 years old, 8 years old, and bigger ones, of course, who have issues with viewing inappropriate content. They've viewed it more than once, several times. And I'm always intrigued by how it started. I always ask them, when was the first time you saw this? Where was it? When was it? How come you watched it? And usually it goes back to access that was not supervised, access without boundaries. What was the child doing with their phone alone in the room at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. at night? On a school night, more to that. My friends talked about it in school. They told me to come and check. So I came home and I was trying to check. and I just stumbled upon it. They usually just stumble upon it. Oh, I was playing a game and then I saw an advert. It looked funny. I saw the people doing some funny things. So I clicked. That's one of the cheapest ways the porn industry gets these children in. Using those game apps, those game sites. You know, that your child is a game addict, always wanting to play games. It will start innocently like that. But then, because there are no boundaries, there's no supervision, the child will wander, will find a particular game, will discover a new game that maybe is not appropriate for their age, but it doesn't seem to, the game itself is harmless. But the problem is the fact that this particular app is showing inappropriate advertisements. It's showing pornographic adverts. And then it's just like, I saw them doing some funny things. It looks like a cartoon. Sometimes it even comes as a cartoon advert. So it's porn, but what they use is not human. They use cartoons, But the child clicks thinking that it's a kind of cartoon, clicks on it, lands on a site where they shouldn't be, and then they're like, oh, let me see this one. And that's just how the habit grows. It usually starts from curiosity. So over-controlling, under-guiding, both of them are mistakes. Now, let's look at what happens across development. I'll just mention, as we are approaching the end, I'll mention a few things you should note for the different developmental stages. Remember I said that the reason why the impact of the screen is unique for the different developmental stages because the kids at these stages need different things. Their development stirs different needs. They have different needs. The development needs different things to be fueled, to be supported. Okay? For the toddler, the child needs to explore. They are called little explorers. It's a stage of exploration, right? Now, the stage, you have the primary school stage. I'm just calling primary school. There's no stage. It's not called primary school. I'm just trying to help you see the age range I'm referring to, all right? These are the kids who are middle age. These are the kids who are preschoolers. These are people who are entering a stage where they're very curious. They want to know everything about everything. So that stage is the stage where they would find, if they have uncontrolled access, they might easily stumble on things that is not appropriate for them, okay, because of their curiosity. We go now to the preteen and the teenage stage. This is the stage where your child is forming their identity. Your child is building their identity. Your child is discovering self. Your child is trying to, build their sense of self, which makes them very sensitive to what their peers think, to what their peers are doing, and they're also very sensitive to, they're vulnerable to culture, media, what the trends are. They're very vulnerable to those things because, those are things that are popular amongst their peers. Remember, peer influence is at its peak at this stage. So if you understand that, then you can also understand why their needs at that stage will also make them vulnerable in a different way from every other stage I've mentioned at this particular time of their growth and development. All right. So babies to toddlers, let's talk about 0 to 2 years. They are vulnerable because their brain is growing very rapidly. They don't want it. Your child is not moving around because they want to be a burden. I promise you, that's not why. They're moving around because their brain is driving them to do so. They're touching, and if you understand this, you support that need instead of hinder it. I think we had a session, 2 weeks ago, talking about, are you helping or hindering development, right? Many parents think that they are helping it. That's why I said you can have good intentions, but then if you don't have the knowledge backing up those intentions, you would make foolish decisions that will instead cause more trouble for you and your child. So they need this movement. They need this sensory play. They need to touch things. They need to go outside. They need to meet people. They need to talk with you. They need to talk with you, all right? Not stay stuck on the screen. So if you understand this need, then you understand how the screen negatively impacts the stage as when it's introduced early. It delays speech because speech is developed in interaction, not by watching somebody talk on TV. That's not how speech and language is developed. Your child will be using words, but they lack the ability to engage in conversation or to produce speech. Okay? Many parents don't understand the connection. I've explained it severally earlier on. I hope you listened to that. So that's why you see all the things that come out of a child who was exposed to screen early. All right? Emotional regulation happens when a child has interactions with other people. They get disappointed, they get frustrated. All those things actually helping the child learn to better manage their emotions over time. Is it tiring for you? Yes. Is it beneficial for the child? Of course. They need it. They need the no, and then they get angry and roll on the floor. They need to hear, don't touch that. They need to hear, come here instead. They need to hear all those things that might trigger frustration, but that helps them grow, especially when the parent knows how to handle the tantrum. It helps the child develop emotional regulation. That's why kids who are screen addicts have very aggressive and wild tantrums. A normal child will get angry, fall on the floor, be screaming and kicking their legs. A child who is a screen addict will do the same thing, but will hit their head violently on the floor. Can you imagine that? Those are all signs that your child lacks, is having, they call them wild tantrums. There's another word for it. I can't remember what that is. Wild tantrums. That's exaggerated. Fall on the floor, roll around, scream, cry, But the child who has had their emotional development by screen use would go further to do aggressive things, hit their head on the wall. In fact, that's the most common. Most of them will hit their head on the floor, on the wall, and all of that. All right. So it can explain to you, you can understand now why when they are stuck on the screen for long, because it limits movement and interaction with other people, they don't develop in these other areas that are supposed to be helped by their interaction with people, including with the negative emotions that come out of there. So delayed language, reduced attention, they lack focus. So every toddler lacks focus, but a toddler who is on the screen lacks it even more. So if a toddler has an attention span of 1 minute, the child who has screen exposure, excessive screen exposure, will have it far less. So while the other child is actually started at 1 minute attention span, as they grow older, it's supposed to get better. But a child who is on the screen all the time, it actually gets worse. That's how you know something is wrong. My child is not developing properly, because instead of the focus to get better over time, it's getting worse. All right. The child is in class 1, teacher still complaining. Your child can't sit down. Your child is always fidgeting. Your child has a focus problem. And if you look back, usually you will find screen somewhere in there at the early stages. Common errors: using the screen as a nanny. That's the biggest error at this stage. You have to, or replacing play with screens. You don't want the child to get dirty. You don't want the child to soil their clothes. Let them jump in the mud. I don't know if you've watched these programs on TV where you see whites, they'll put on the child wear boots and go and jump in the mud. And you're like, what? People are mad. Yes. That's the kind of play that benefits children at that stage. They need to play with the mud, touch it, get messy, rub it on their hair, and then they come and you give them a bath. That's what soap and water is for. It's for bathing, for washing off the mess. So when your child has, how to help a child at this stage is to keep them away from the screens as much as, this is the stage where you want to be overly protective. You want to over limit. You actually want to limit it completely, especially before 2 years. All right. No screen time at all. You protect them from it. So you limit access completely before 2. After 2, you want to minimize exposure and ensure that you're streaming quality content designed for adults, designed and approved for adults. There's this website that actually helps. It's called Common Sense Media. It actually helps you rate, if you type in a cartoon that your child is probably watching or something your child is considering showing to your child, it will tell you whether it is quality content or not. Quality in terms of what a child at that age needs. So you can check out that site. All right. So at this stage, every touch, every sound, every facial expression, even, right? Your facial, when you're angry, your child is learning. All the interactions you have with that toddler, interactions are what feeds and fuels their development positively. That's what, nothing can replace human connection, especially in those early years. Nothing. That's why the screen would have them memorizing all manner of things and still not be able to ask you, Mama, please give me banana. And you're wondering, my child is 2, is 3, and still cannot say, I want to drink water. And that makes it hard for you. Or still can say, I want to poo, or I want to pee, and you're trying to potty train them. They can't tell you that. Why? Because their speech delayed. Now, the next stage is the early or middle childhood, kids between, let's just say, 4 to 11. I'm going to add even preteens to this stage because of time. So they're vulnerable. Why? Because their focus is developed. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the child starts off with very short attention span in the toddler years. But as they enter the next stage of development, their focus is supposed to begin to develop progressively. All right, it's supposed to develop progressively. So if that's why if you look at how the school system is structured, when you look at how pre-nursery, nursery one, nursery two, they are taught, is very different from how class 1 to class 6 are being taught. Class 1 to 6, they sit down for long. Why? Because at that stage, the child who is developing normally is supposed to be able to sit at least for a good amount of time. But before then, they're not expected to do that. That's why they will stand, clap their hands, hands up, hands down, turn around, they'll sing, they'll dance. That's what they do all day long. Why? Because that stage of their education is built according to what they are capable of, short attention span. But when they go higher and your child is still struggling with focus, then that's a problem. So they're supposed to be developing focus at this stage, developing their creativity and developing their social skills. They're supposed to get better at managing their emotions, at interacting with other people, other children. They're supposed to be better now at being able to maybe share, play with other kids, and not take turns. So when you interfere with how this continuous development at this stage, you realize that focus goes backwards. The child is still antisocial. The child lacks creativity, lacks imagination. The child still has a short attention span. Why? That's the impact of the screen at that stage. So it looks different from what happens at the earlier stages. So the common errors, unlimited entertainment. Many parents just feel like they should just keep entertaining the child, not just even screens, sometimes even the gadgets we buy. We are just constantly fueling. We don't want them to be bored. So I talked about creativity being a need, all right? And without that, you realize that if you're constantly trying to keep your child entertained, that's another thing that limits their creativity. So constantly watching TV, no matter what they're watching, it doesn't. Most times, what people watch on screen you don't need to think much. The brain doesn't light up a lot when you're watching TV, when you're watching a program on TV. But when you're doing something, building a puzzle, coloring a page, you're trying to make stuff out of mud or playing football with your friends, the child is thinking a lot. The child is calculating different things, and it's helping their brain develop properly. So what you need to do for your child at this stage is to provide guided use of the screen. Do not use it as a remedy for boredom. Just because the child is bored, let them be bored. The biggest creations were born out of boredom. Boredom is good for your child. Yes, boredom is good. My child said, Mama, I'm bored. Oh, okay. You're bored. That's okay. It's normal to be bored from time to time. You don't always have to be doing something. So, what can you do now? I don't know. Can we just watch TV? No, it's not your time for the screen. Go and think about something that you can do to keep yourself busy. And you see the child will go and take leaves and be trying to make. That's how we did some of the fun things we did as children. We used to play a lot in the stream. I had a stream behind my house growing up as a child. We would catch tadpole, different things. When a child is bored, the child begins to use their mind to entertain themselves, and that's how the mind grows in the process. So screens should be tools for learning, not toys, not entertainment outlets. And at this age, children will need to balance digital and real-world exploration. So yes, you can use the screen for learning at this stage. Not just for entertainment. Balance entertainment with learning as well. Let your children watch things that support what they are being taught in school, learn about different things, but also, for at least some entertainment as well. But you don't want to overindulge the entertainment part of it, because that's what creates addictions. All right. Now, the last stage, of course, as we round up, is the teenagers. If you have a question, feel free to drop it in the comments. As we round up, I'm going to take any question you might have. If something I said wasn't clear, or you want to know more about something, drop it in the comments, and I'm going to talk about it just before I shut down. I'm sorry I've been, going on, and I didn't take a break to actually ask you to drop comments or to, share your thoughts. What is hitting home for you this evening? All right, what is resonating with you as I go? You can share that in the comments. It could help someone else. You want to add flesh to something I've said, something you've noticed as well. Drop it in the comments, and that actually adds value to the session. So teenagers, this is a big stage, all right? Especially because most teenagers today just want to be on social media, and I don't blame them. Remember, this is the peak age for peer pressure. They would be inclined to want to do what their peers are doing. That's why, as a parent, if you have a teenager, your teenager most likely may have asked you, Mama, can I have a phone? Mama, can I be on social media? Mama, can I have a Facebook account? Some kids actually go on to ask their parents. Anyway, it depends. If you're intentional and you've actually had a media plan is something that, defines how screens are to be used within your home. That's something we teach parents, on the 1 year program. Developing a media plan. If you're here from the level 1, we are yet to do it. Okay, don't worry. We are going to teach that. I think during the long holiday period, how to design a media plan for your home. It's very important. It's a very, very important document. Just like your family vision, your structure, you need a media plan. You need a document that lets your children know you can have a phone maybe at this level. This is how it's supposed to be used. This is how computers are used. This is how TV should be used. Do and what you can do. So a document that tells your kids what to expect, tells your kids how to behave towards these devices. It's a very important document. So kids at the teenage stages are very, very vulnerable because social media is tough. Letting your child have a phone is one thing. Giving your child access to social media is a whole other ball game that you don't want to just do it because your child is saying my friends are all doing it. Trust me, you don't. Social media has been linked to being one of the number one causes for depression, particularly amongst teenagers. Because I talked about how I'm working with a teenager who has lost himself in the quest for likes and views because he's been putting up content on the media, on the social media platforms. And he has gotten to the point where education no longer interests him. He's always only about the content. I need to create content, I need to create content, I need to create content, I need more likes, I need more views. Especially with the monetization that has been added on it. That's one other thing that makes it like steroids or like a drug now. Like a drug that is so addictive, is pulling people. People are doing mad things now, including kids. We see kids online who are doing terrible things because it gets them views and likes. And of course, they get paid at the end. So I can be 16 and I'm earning a fat paycheck. And sometimes the parents are not even aware that the kids are on there doing those things, So yeah, we are living in a time when parents have to be very intentional, especially when it comes to access to social media. Why are we in a rush? Why are we in a rush? Think about how social media affects you as an adult. Then put an underdeveloped brain on that space. What do you have? There's argument now where parents say, oh, now kids are earning money, people are actually making a living out of social media, and it's better to let them in there early so they can start building a career for themselves. And then you see some of these kids on there, you look at the content they're putting out, and you're like, this child will regret this. Why? Because these are children who don't have their judgment faculty properly developed. So there are things they'll put on there, they're not able to think about. Imagine that there are adults today who are putting things on social media that makes you ask yourself questions, who have been banned from accessing different countries as adults because they posted something that was a red flag. People have gone to the embassy and they've been denied visas because of something they posted 5 years ago. So social media is not a space where you just want to go there and just do any kind of thing and do anyhow. It will come back to bite you. So imagine children out there who are underaged, who have underdeveloped brains. They're just posting stuff, sending their nudes to people, particularly the girls on Snapchat. I can't tell you how many young girls I've had to work with who their parents caught were doing things like this, snapping parts of her body, intimate parts of her body, and sharing it on social media. Boys as well, it's not just the girls. The new show me I show you is now on social media. It's now on social media platform, WhatsApp. The new show me I show you is no longer where you go behind to go and pee at the back of the class and you say, show me your own, I'll show you my own. No, it's no longer like that. Well, it's still like that, but it has evolved as well. So they don't even need to be in the same space anymore to do show me and show you. They just use their phones now. Snap it, send. And the child is not aware that that picture can cost them so much later when they are now able to rationalize their actions. And at this stage, it's the parent that's supposed to help the child, because you can have that rational thinking. You can see that this thing is not good in the long run, but your child cannot reason it like that. They'll think you're being their enemy. My friends are earning $1,000 and I'm here. You cannot take care of me, but you won't let me be on there. So they should be, but even if you're going to let your child on that space, you have to define boundaries. You have to, for your child's sake. The fact that nothing, the internet never forgets. For that reason alone, the child needs guidance. All right. So at this stage, they are vulnerable because they are forming their identity. There's peer pressure. So they are very keen on what their peers are doing as well. They are emotionally sensitive as well. Puberty and all of that. They're emotionally sensitive in so many ways. So they're building their sexual identity. They're building their personal identity, who they are. They're finding that out. But also sexual identity as well. Because this is the stage where your child begins to develop sexual characteristics. So imagine that at that stage where the child is still trying to figure their body out, they start getting exposed to inappropriate content. That completely changes or impacts how they're going to develop sexually as well. Because it's not just physical, it's also mental. What they're thinking, what they think about it. What they think about it. So it easily becomes an obsession, become either over obsessed with their body, how they look. They are watching stuff where they see girls. We have all these influencers today. Not every influencer has a positive impact. So if your child is on the social media space, you should also be concerned, who are they following? Who are they listening to? Because these are people who are shaping their lives, their views about life. They're shaping their views about life. Because no teenager will come online to watch me. I'll be very boring for them, right? I mean, if I'm boring for some adults, how come, what more of a child? So that's not what they're going on there to watch. They're going on there to watch people dancing stuff, posting, commenting on different things. Some people who are not married, commenting about marriage and planting some of these ideas into their minds about what they should look like, what beautiful is, what handsome is, what dating is about. They are learning a lot of things on social media, learning about gender as well. Now have issues with gender online, in the world at large. So this is it is a stage where I see many parents making the big mistake of just handing over the phone without much thought. You earned it. You passed GCE. You earned it. So you have a phone, full-blown Android phone. Oh, even the iPhone 17 Pro Max. The kids who have phones that some of us adults cannot even afford yet. But that doesn't dilute the impact of what it is that they're going to have access to on that phone. And most of these parents do not make the time to check. Not just check. Once a month is not enough. Especially if you haven't defined boundaries. Not enough. You can't just say, I trust my teenager. You're dealing with a child whose judgment faculty is underdeveloped, for Christ's sake. So they're going to make foolish decisions, even with that device. They are wired to test boundaries at that stage. Meaning that just because you said, don't go here, doesn't mean they will not. It's not a matter of goodness. It's a matter of how their brain is at that stage. They are wired to take risks. They are wired to test boundaries. They are wired to, explore. So once you understand this and you understand who you're dealing with, that also helps you understand who you need to be for that child to safely navigate that space, what you need to do. So giving your child a phone is a big responsibility for them, but also for you, the parent, because you have to provide guidance. You have to set boundaries. Many kids are getting lost on social media. There are kids who are not going to pursue career. They're just going to want to just be content creators. Am I saying being content creator is not something that is lucrative? Of course, it's lucrative. But then when we talk about life purpose, when we talk about impact, when we talk about some of the things that maybe your child is called to be, they want to discover the cure for cancer, but then they get stuck creating content on social media that just makes people laugh, and in fact, they're obsessed with likes, doing whatever it takes to get likes. They've just rerouted their purpose. I have a 17-year-old whom I haven't permitted to own a phone because she's distracted and not very disciplined. Yes, I love that reasoning. I only allow her to use my phone for schoolwork and sometimes to watch educative content. That's great. I love that you've made that observation that, she's indisciplined, she is distracted, and it's very important because that is a starting point. But remember I said, don't just focus on limiting. Focus also on, because she's 17, in about 3 years or so, she'll probably be on her own, So skills don't just develop overnight. skills developed through practice. So you want to, maybe start chattering a little agreement, start giving what I call guided exposure. What is called guided exposure, where you give controlled access. Au fur et à mesure, say in French. Small, small. I don't know how to say it in English. Au fur et à mesure. So small, small. You give small, you give small. The Bible says, he who is faithful over little will be faithful over much. I think I've taught this here several times. You test faithfulness over little. So you give small access. You watch how the child handles it. And the child is building skills in the process. And then you increase a little bit. That's exactly how phones should be given to children. You don't just give and say, don't do bad things. You start. It starts with how they use your phone. Are they able to stay within the defined boundaries with your own phone? They've been able to. You let the child know. We'll start by observing how you use. Let the child know what you're watching out for, what you're testing them for, what you're trying to teach them, and then you graduate from there. You step it up a little bit. I'll give you your phone, I'll get you a phone, but you will use it maybe on weekends only when there's no school, and you only be maybe in the evenings for 1 hour, and you hand it over to me. You don't have a password on the phone. I can access it at any time. You let the child know those are the rules at the beginning. And then from there, you watch how your child is handling that, and then you graduate. Because the child needs to practice. Even if you block them from using the screen till when they are age 24, and you have not built the skills, the child will still struggle. You're just delaying the inevitable. You're delaying the inevitable. So don't just restrict access, build skills. Don't just restrict access, build skills. All right? So give controlled access while you're building skills, while you're building discipline, while you're helping the child understand why this is not, why this is better this way, how to choose. Why should you be on social media? So let the child learn. This is a time for you to prepare her for when she will eventually be fully independent. That's going to be a gift for her, right? Am I very controlling as a parent? No, you're not. You're just not making room for her to learn the skills that she needs. Remember, your judgment at the beginning, I said, is very sound. Those are keen things that you've noticed, very important, very pertinent. But those things you've noticed should also be the parameters that you'll be observing to notice her growth. So keep working to help her grow from that point, because she's not just going to become disciplined because you stopped her from using a phone, but she's going to become disciplined because you've helped her learn within set boundaries how to operate, and then eventually be able to be independent, because that is inevitable. Independence is inevitable, right? What helps is preparation for independence. I hope that my answer helps you. All right. So please note, sexualized content is a threat. Don't tell me your teenager is good. Please don't tell me that. All right. Don't tell me your teenager is good. Goodness should not be the parameter that you use to ready for a phone or not. It should not be that. Skills, ability to navigate safely, understanding of the risks versus the benefits, where to go, and how to move within that space. That is what determines whether a child is ready or not. Not goodness. Not goodness. Okay? Thank you. So kids at this stage, teenagers, they are vulnerable to what? Cyberbullying, the teasing. Trust me, sometimes if you go and visit some of the teenagers online, I ask myself, how is this child okay? Because people will not have mercy on you because you're young. That's another thing. Social media is so hostile. That's the word. It's hostile even to children. I've seen posts online where it's a child. You see a 16-year-old. People go online and the comment section and tell her you're ugly with your ugly face. You look like this. They're not going to have mercy. So before you let your child out there, know that they're going to a space where there are basically no rules. People will come on there and say very mean things to your child. Is your child ready to handle those things? How will it affect their self-esteem? How will it affect their self-perception? You have to ask yourself this question. Is my child ready for this? So don't expect your teen to just self-regulate. Don't expect your teen to just have skills, like I said, because they are good. All right? Don't dismiss their digital world as just nonsense. Take interest. If you have a child on that space, take interest. Follow them. All right. Follow them. I have teenagers who, they have two accounts. One that their parent knows, the other one that the parent does not know. And the parent doesn't know. And the other one is where the real activity is happening. That's where they are going and saying different things online. That's where they are exposing their real self. The other one is where they go and say cautious things, so the parent can see that they are positive. And the parents say, oh, my child is good. Remember, goodness is not a skill. All right? Goodness is not a skill. Do not over control without dialogue, without training, without giving room for experience with guided exposure. So it has to be something you're working on with your teenager. You've gone far above time. All right, I hope that you have gotten value from this session today. Thank you for your question, Mama Patience. It's a very personal question. I love that you asked that question. It helped really put everything into perspective, all right, and help parents see what it looks like when you're not over controlling, all right, what you have to add to the limitation that you have to put to access when it comes to children, using devices and accessing these spaces where we adults also operate. Remember that your children today are not just consuming screens, they are actually living with them. They'll meet it everywhere, in school, in church, everywhere they'll meet screens. So I hope that after listening to the session today, as a parent, you pay attention to how the screen is impacting your child, to who your child is even. Different kids would not interact with screens the same way. Like she said about her 17-year-old, she pointed out some personality traits. The child lacks discipline, or very indisciplined, and is distracted. There are some kids who are very focused, the melancholic kids, very focused, they follow rules, they carry themselves well. So you can also tell from your child's ability to lead themselves. How is my child? Is my child at the stage where are they mature enough to handle this? Are they able to lead themselves at least, fairly well to be able to handle this kind of responsibility? So there are so many things you have to be able to consider before you say this is the age. It's not really about an age, it's more about skills. It's more about personality. Thank you so much for being here, for waiting out till the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you've not done so yet. And don't forget that enrollment is currently going on for the the exclusive 1-year program. All right, trust me, that is a place where you want to be, because imagine 12 months of guidance, 12 months of being in a community where you access support, where you get things like this, right, that help you put certain decisions in perspective and just, go on your parenting journey with lots of confidence. One of the things that I want you to note is, and this is actually good news, is that you don't have to wait until the next cohort is launched in December. All right, we've created a waiting forum where all you have to do is just book a slot now or register, and then you'll be able to access the waiting forum where you can have access to material that helps you learn while waiting, because it's a long wait. April to December is a long wait. Okay, so you're probably like, if I pay now, what will I be doing? So you actually get to have access to material that helps you start learning, start growing, even while waiting for the next cohort to be launched. So I look forward to seeing you there. Don't forget to send us a chat. I'm going to drop the number in the maybe the comment section. So if you want to reach out, you can reach out to know more about this program. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. Bye.